Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Cubit. And thank you for joining me tonight. And thanks for supporting these weekly conversations. If you are new to these weekly conversations, welcome to the community, and I consider you family. My team and I are so excited that you found your way here. And by the way, I love getting all the words of encouragement in my inbox, so please keep those coming. They mean so much to me and my team, and it even means a lot to the guests that join me every week. Be sure to go back and check out some of the past conversations. You will not be disappointed. Some great, phenomenal people have joined me here. But I do need you to do me a favor. Tonight, I need you to share this conversation. If you are concerned or you know people that might be the least bit concerned about the criminal justice system, tonight's conversation you really want to be a part of. So don't keep this conversation to yourself. Share it with your community. Don't be that kind of person that just hogs the conversation. Share it. So hit the share button or start a watch party. You probably have already noticed that I am not at the Green Pasture Studios where we normally broadcast from. So special shout out to Richard and Amy James for giving these weekly conversations a home out in Spencer, Oklahoma. Tonight, we are in downtown Oklahoma City, across from the place where justice is supposed to be taking place. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But before I do that, let me share with you the very simple goals I have for these weekly conversations. There's only three. One, add value to people and my community. That's all I want to do. Two, I want to inspire you to believe in what people and communities become, especially when we work together. And three, just love people, period, no strings attached. All this means is that I want you to be inspired. I want you to get useful information and resources, and I want to celebrate individuals, groups, and organizations who are making a positive impact on our community. Every conversation here on Conversations with Cubit will be about information, inspiration, and hope. Now, let's get serious. Now, let me give you some numbers. 166. That's the number of new exonerations we have had in the United States since 2016. The cost of the investigation and litigation of a DNA post-conviction case is more than $100,000. And the cost for a similar matter where DNA is not a factor can reasonably run upwards of $150,000. And it is estimated that 3 to 5% of a prison population contains wrongfully convictions. So how many people is that? In the current prison population, this could equal 800 to 1,350 people. 34 is the number of exonerations that Oklahoma lists on the National Registry for Exonerations. Does any of this bother you? Well, it certainly bothers my very special guest that we have tonight. Please allow me to introduce you to Vicki Behenna. I got it. Vicki is a friend of mine who I just call Vicki, who I met when we shared a stage discussing race relations a few years ago, or maybe a year or so ago. And so she graduated from the Oklahoma City University of Law and has spent 25 years as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Oklahoma. And during her tenure, she's tried fraud cases, and she was responsible for the prosecution of complex public corruption cases. Behenna was selected to participate in the Oklahoma City bombing case against Timothy McVeigh as a special attorney to then U.S. Attorney Janet Reno. In 2015, Vicki was named the executive director of the Oklahoma Innocence Project. Her tenacious efforts on behalf of the wrongly convicted gave her unique insight into the complex issues in this field and the ability to not only manage the clinic, but also the talent and experience to serve as an advocate in court for the clinic's clients. Would you please send a warm, virtual welcome to my friend Vicki. Welcome to Conversations with Cubit.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, you're busy. You are very, 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 very busy. And so before we, I don't know where to start. There's so much that I want to unpack because we talk, there's always that conversation before the conversation.
Yeah.
So so you were busy in court today. Were you fighting wrongfully, or is it separate? What are you doing?
It is. So I'm the executive director of the Innocence Project, but I also have a private practice doing criminal defense work.
Okay, so you're still on the grind.
Yes.
I want to know a little bit. That name is not usual. So I want to know, are you an Oklahoman? Tell me, catch us up on who Vicki is.
I was born in Oklahoma City and was raised here until I was about 10 years old. And then my father worked for the Defense Department. My mother was English, and so he was able to get a job in Germany, and we stayed there. I graduated from high school in Germany, came back here to go to school. Behenna is my husband's name. My name is very simple, my maiden name, Zemp. Okay, so,
all right.
So it goes from bad to worse. But no, I was born and bred Oklahoma.
That's very good. And so, husband, practice, school, Oklahoma. 25 years is about where people are wrapping up their careers. And so you spent 25 years as a federal prosecutor.
Yeah.
And basically, when we're on the same team,
Right.
But how do you go from being on the team, the prosecutor, catching the bad guys, prosecuting the bad guys, convicting the bad guys, to defense work, and even getting the wrongfully convicted out? How do you land in that space?
Yeah. So I had a family member of mine who was charged and convicted of murder. I mean, it's no surprise, it was my son who was serving in Iraq at the time. And I watched that entire process from the other side of the courtroom. I mean, the prosecution always sits close to the jury. Now I was at the far end of the courtroom at the other table, watching somebody fight for his life. And he was convicted. We went through years of appeals. And having had that experience of being on the other side of the courtroom, there was a need inside me to pivot, to do something else. I tell people, and even my friends that are still prosecutors in law enforcement, who think I'm crazy doing the Innocence Project stuff, is that I'm working for justice just like they're working for justice. I'm just doing it on the back end and making sure we get it right. Trials and prosecutions they involve humans. And we know that anytime human beings are involved in a process, mistakes can happen.
We mess it up.
That almost assuredly. And so while we have a good criminal justice system, it needs to be tweaked, it needs to be changed, and it needs to be reformed. And so seeing the experience of my son made me, I think, realize that, open my eyes. And again, I did a pivot. I left the U.S. Attorney's Office and then started representing individuals who found themselves into the criminal justice system.
So you said something that's interesting, and I've always thought about that. So when I introduced you, I was saying we were on the same side because I'm a police officer, but then you went to the other side. But the reality is there should be no side, right?
It's all seeking justice.
If we're all seeking justice, there's no side.
No. It's all a process in the system, right? I mean, the system is designed for advocacy by the state or the government and advocacy on behalf of the defendant. And so, no, it's all part of the process. It's what the Constitution envisioned. A fair and just trial for those that are accused. And we'll get to that later.
Yeah, I'm ready for that. but before that, so I started out by talking about these numbers. Who people can find this when they go to the Innocent Project, Oklahoma's Innocent Project's website, is these numbers.
I think your numbers are low.
I just grabbed them, right? 166.
There were 129 exonerations in 2020.
1 year?
1 year. There have been almost 2,700 exonerations since we started keeping records in about 1989. So your numbers are low.
Somebody got to update the website because those are very low. Because
yes.
it was 166 since 2016.
No, unfortunately. Well, or fortunately for the people that found themselves wrongfully convicted, right? I think those numbers are much greater, really.
So, if the numbers are that way, Vicki, what are we supposed to do with that? Like, I'm wrestling with this because you said we have a good criminal justice system.
Not perfect.
You said good. Those numbers don't suggest good.
Well, and let me clarify that. What I mean by that is that the process, the way it was designed, is
Okay.
good.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fair.
I don't think the way the system ends up handling convictions and prosecutions is always good. And as I started with, there's always room for improvement, and we need to recognize that. That's one of the reasons I was so excited about coming to talk to you, because I think there are so many times I go out in the community and I say, have you ever heard of the Oklahoma Innocence Project? Have you ever heard of the Innocence Project? And people have never heard of that. And it's sad to me that we haven't gotten that word out. We, and I'm talking about those of us that practice in this arena, haven't gotten the issue out, and that is that people are wrongfully convicted of crimes. People plead guilty to crimes they didn't do.
Okay, let's unpack this thing then. Wrongfully convicted.
Mm-hmm.
When you say wrongfully convicted,
Mm-hmm.
are you meaning, does the Innocent Project and Vicki, do you all mean they didn't do it? Or are we saying there was something in the process, there was a technicality in the courtroom that they shouldn't have been convicted because of that? Or they just didn't? These are people that did not do the crime.
These are people that did not do the crime of which they were accused and convicted. One of the criteria in the Innocence Project at Oklahoma City University School of Law is that our clients, and you have to be able to be proven innocent. You can't have been involved in the crime in any way. You couldn't have been an accessory. You couldn't have been in the space but say that you didn't do it. You couldn't claim self-defense. You cannot have been involved in that criminal activity in any way, shape, or form. These are not technicalities. We're not getting bad people off based upon some sort of, technicality in the law. That's not what it is. When we take a case at the Oklahoma Innocence Project, we are there to prove our client's innocence. If we can't, or we don't think that they were innocent, then we close that case and we move on to somebody who we know we can prove is innocent of the crime of which they were convicted.
That is so. Now go back to those numbers again. What
Yeah.
happened in 2020?
Yeah.
What was the number?
100, this is from I pulled this today. This is from the National Registry of Exonerations. They've been keeping records of exonerations for about 9 years, since about, 2012. And there were 129 exonerations in the United States in 2020.
These are people, I'm trying to wrap my brain around. These are people that were proven to not even be there, to not be involved in the crime.
The exonerations means that person is innocent.
Okay.
That person was innocent. Well, you said the statistics yourself. 3
Yeah.
to 5% of our prison population is believed to be wrongfully convicted and wrongfully incarcerated. Do you know how many people we have incarcerated in the United States?
We're number one in the world.
Right. 2.1 million. 3 to 5% of that? It's a frightening number.
Right, and I made a point of saying in the introduction is that 3 to 5% really sounds low when you say 3 to 5%, but when you break it down to 800 people in one prison, or as many as 1,300 people in one prison, did not do what they said they did.
Right. Or were convicted of.
Break
right?
that down to what happens. What is happening to a wrongfully convicted person? What is happening?
Oh my gosh, it's so sad. We had 2 exonerations. So in 2015, when the dean asked me to take over the position of the executive director of the Oklahoma Innocence Project, we had 2 clients that were getting ready to have an evidentiary hearing in Tulsa County in front of Judge Holmes. And the judge, or the dean, she used to be a United States magistrate judge, so I still call her a judge, asked me to help on that evidentiary hearing. And we presented the evidence. The judge found them factually innocent of the crime of murder, and we'll come back and talk about that, I suspect, in a little bit. But So I have watched these two, they were 17 and 18 years old when they went into custody. They're now 40 and 41 when they come out. And to watch them, one of them has done extremely well. I mean, he knew what he wanted to do. He landed on his feet. He wanted to be a personal fitness trainer. He went for that goal, and he's very successful. And one of them has struggled. And so when you ask what happens to somebody who's wrongfully convicted, forget on the inside the trauma that you have to deal with. But when you get, if you're lucky enough to get exonerated, they missed 22 years. They missed 22 Christmases, 22 birthdays, 22 family years of family gatherings. And so trying to figure out in a world that is swept past them. When they went in, there weren't iPhones, there weren't computers on everybody's desk. And to try to learn all that and explain to an employer now, why don't you have a work history for the past 22 years? Well, you see, I was convicted of murder, but I'm really innocent of that. I mean, some really struggle.
And they automatically think, I'm so glad you clarified exoneration. When people say you got out on a technicality.
Right. No, it's not that at all. I mean, some of our people that are exonerated are the result of a Brady violation, where some people might think that's a technicality, but it's not. The state and the government is required to turn over evidence to the defense that exculpates somebody, that shows that they didn't commit the crime. And when the state or the government doesn't do that, the Constitution says that conviction has to be reversed. So maybe some people would say that's a technicality. It's not. It's a fairness issue. It's a due process issue. And it's embedded in the Constitution. If you don't have the facts to defend yourself, how do you defend yourself?
Right. Go to these specific cases that you're talking about. We have two young men that ultimately did not do what the state said they do. Well, before you give me the details, what do we owe them? What do we owe them? Like, they're 40, they're 22 years, they're 40. What does the state owe them?
In Vicki Behenna's opinion?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
A job, training, housing, mental health to deal with trauma, insurance to the best we can for a limited period of time to get them on their feet. We took from them their productivity, right? You know what the state of Oklahoma pays people who are factually innocent? Not everybody that gets exonerated, but those people, and it's very few people have the finding of factually innocent. When we find somebody factually innocent, the judge does that in the state of Oklahoma, we pay him $175,000. Not per year of their incarceration, total $175,000. That's it.
That's it. And, oh, wow. So take me through the case. But before we go to the case, though, I really want to get to the case. So let's not leave the conversation before you break the case down. But when we talk about we're both in the business of justice, right? And we know that when humans are involved, even if you're doing your best, there's going to be some mistakes.
Right.
And the state has to pay $175,000 to these few. Maybe they should pay it to everybody. But to avoid that, what are the safeguards that's in this place back here, this courthouse?
Oh.
What are the safeguards in place that are placed to catch mistakes? Why do we have to have an Innocence Project?
Well, because unfortunately in Oklahoma, we don't have a conviction integrity unit.
There's such a thing?
Yes. I mean, Texas has one. Tarrant County had a problem with wrongful convictions, and they had a huge number of exonerations. And the community leaders in that community decided it was important enough to them to have a conviction integrity unit that reviewed convictions that were questionable. So yes, states do have these conviction integrity units. Oklahoma does not.
Why wouldn't we?
Money, resources.
Well, we just went over the money. upwards of $150,000
Right.
for one case.
Right. To investigate it.
To investigate one
Right.
case.
And that investigation takes anywhere from 5 to 7 years, 8 years.
So somebody's suffering that long anyway, just to look at it.
Right. Right.
And these integrity units are looking at them all the time. They're looking
That's
at
it.
every conviction that comes through the court.
That's it. Let me give you an example. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. The FBI did an analysis of hair testimony and people that have been convicted based upon FBI analysts analyzing a hair found at a crime scene, hair taken from a suspect. And what the FBI found is that many of those individuals that were convicted based upon that hair analysis were convicted based upon overstated testimony by that analyst. In other words, a hair analyst said, this hair from the crime scene and this hair from your head match. I can eyeball that and match. What we know about hair analysis is that it's very subjective. It's not like fingerprints, it's not like DNA. And so they found that it was, primarily an analyst couldn't match hairs. If it had DNA on it, that's something different.
That's different.
But
That's
just
DNA,
looking at the
not
hairs.
hair.
Right. So the OSBI took it upon themselves to start a review. Nobody forced them to do it. Nobody from a DA's office or an AG's office said, this is something you will do, OSBI. The OSBI felt that it was incumbent upon them because they had analysts that were testifying throughout the state of Oklahoma analyzing hair. And they've undergone their own review of testimony or cases. They're identifying cases right now where an OSBI hair analyst may have testified, which may have resulted in a wrongful conviction. The Oklahoma Innocence Project is working with the OSBI on that. Again, it goes back to the comment I made from the beginning about we're all here for one thing, and that is justice.
That makes sense. Like,
Of course.
let's check ourselves.
Right, right.
And I suspect the idea was like, we're not comfortable with the testimony they gave with that.
Yes,
Innocence Project, would you take a look at this case further?
yes, that's it exactly.
Wow. Wow. All right. How can it happen? I cannot imagine being accused of murder at 17 years old with limited resources, zero resources in this case, and going through court, but just alone being arrested is one thing, but then going to the county jail, being with other people who different levels of cases. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mostly they put killers with killers, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. and they assume that I am. Mm-hmm. Help me understand how this happened, how this can happen to me. Go through this case, and then how you end up. Part of my question is I want to know how I got so lucky that the Innocence Project selected my case as one to champion.
Yeah, it's quite a story.
Okay.
Malcolm Scott and DeMarco Carpenter were two young men living on the north side of Tulsa. Okay, I don't know if you've ever been to Tulsa.
Yeah.
If you've been to the north side,
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. It's a rough neighborhood, right? And these were boys. They had no criminal history, although they were known to TPD. Okay.
That
Tulsa Police Department.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought you said. I thought you were, going to marijuana beach. I don't know what that was.
Tulsa Police, because they had that gang unit that patrols the north side of Tulsa, and so they were known to the Tulsa Police. There was a drive-by shooting on a September evening. Evening. It was really in the early morning hours. A bunch of kids, 20-something kids, were out at this street party. Someone drives by in a maroon Taurus and shoots, kills a 19-year-old woman. There were two eyewitnesses that testified that they saw in the car when the shooting happened at 2:30 in the morning,
They
And were
saw
able-
in the car, the car, yeah.
saw in the car.
Okay.
And I don't think they had the lights on in the car as that driver was going by and shooting. But said that they identified Malcolm and DeMarco as the shooters. One of the eyewitnesses was actually shot in the buttocks, which intuitively tells me he wasn't looking at the car. He was, as soon as the first shot was fired, he was running the opposite direction. But needless to say, they both identified Malcolm and DeMarco as the shooters. The detective went to visit a man by the name of Michael Wilson. That morning, the shooting happens at 2:30 in the morning. Michael Wilson is interviewed, 10, 11-ish. Michael Wilson was a known gang member, had been shot 3 days before. Now remember, the people at the drive-by shooting identified that the shooters were in a maroon Ford Taurus. When the detective arrives at Michael Wilson's house, there is a maroon Ford Taurus in his driveway. The detective goes in, sees Michael Wilson, says...
Shot up.
Well...
With bullet holes in it.
Didn't have bullet holes in him.
Well, he got shot 3 days earlier, you just said it.
Well, he did. He did. From that incident, but not from this drive-by
Right, he's
shooting.
freshly shot.
Right, right. And he tells them, I need to take you down to headquarters. We need to do an interview. There was a shooting last night. I need to know what you know about it. Michael sits down in his bed, and he looks like he's trying to take something out of his waistband. The detective says to him, do you have a weapon? He says, yeah. He lays the weapon on the bed. Officer takes possession of it, takes Michael Wilson down. Somewhere in the conversation, Michael Wilson learns that Malcolm and DeMarco have been pinpointed as the shooters.
What happened to this gun that he laid on the bed?
Well, the detective took it. They do ballistics testing.
Okay.
Test positive. Okay, the casings found at the crime scene came from that weapon.
And a maroon
Ford Taurus.
is sitting there, a gun that matches that sits there, and a guy is shot 3 days before this
3 days before. But he's turned into a witness against Malcolm and DeMarco and says that he retrieved the gun from them in the early morning hours. Malcolm and DeMarco didn't even have a car, okay? But that he somehow doesn't ever explain how he retrieved the gun from Malcolm and DeMarco, but that was the story that was told at prelim. That's what got him detained. The eyewitness identification is what got them convicted at trial. And they were convicted solely on that evidence. I will let you know.
What happened to this evidence you just told me? So,
but Michael Wilson said that he got the gun from Malcolm and DeMarco. Didn't say how or where or how soon before. Because remember, this is in the early morning. The shooting happens at 2:30. Michael Wilson is interviewed before noon. There was no information about how, did you see Malcolm and DeMarco after the 2:30 shooting? Did you meet up with him? Did you go have breakfast together? Did they drive by? Did you drive by his house and get the weapon? Did they call you?
Did Malcolm and this Mr. they all knew each other?
Yeah, yeah.
And they're not asking this witness who he thinks shot him 3 days before.
No.
They're not thinking that he might want some get back or some retaliation.
No.
That never comes up.
No. If it did, it's certainly not in the police reports that we were given access to. No. He's allowed to go free. He was released because he said that the murder weapon, that gun that he had, he was just trying to take care of for Malcolm and DeMarco. So he gets released.
Okay, so Malcolm and DeMarco, in my opinion, right now, just as you're telling right here, they screwed up during the interview. They admitted to something. What did they do wrong?
They never said they did anything. They completely denied it. They've always professed their innocence. But we have two eyewitnesses that says it's Malcolm and DeMarco. And that's enough to get them convicted at 18 and 19 years old. These are young
Absent
black
all
men.
the other, okay, what
Absent all of
was so you hear about inadequate defense a lot in this business. Were their defense attorneys, were they capable? Were they equipped? Did they have experience with capital cases like this? How did they miss these things that you just described, even in the probable cause hearings?
Here's what I will tell you about that. When the dean called me and asked me to help with this evidentiary hearing, and the dean said, Vicki, these two young men are innocent, the federal prosecutor in my head went, sure they are. And I said, well, I don't know if they are or not, but let me read the trial transcript. Let me read the trial transcript, let me see what the evidence was, and then I'll make a decision if I want to be involved in it. Mm-hmm. And when I read the trial transcript, it made me physically sick to my stomach. First, that somebody could be convicted on that shallow of evidence. We're talking about evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. It's supposed to be evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. It was two eyewitnesses. One's shot in the buttocks, right? Going that way. And the defense that was presented for these young men's defense sickened me. And it was after I read that and saw what happened to these boys.
It was inadequate defense. Was it inadequate defense? Now I'm going to ask you a tricky question. I'm going to ask you two questions in one. Was it inadequate defense because the lawyers just weren't capable? Like they didn't have the time and experience and they haven't done these types of cases? That's one option. That could happen. But is it because these men and the time it takes to defend these men who cannot adequately pay me is not worth my time to put in the time? That's another option. And then the one that nobody wants to talk about that I really want to put you on the record to talk about, to help us work through the criminal justice system, the defense mechanism, the defense of people, is the race issue. How much of them being from the north side of Tulsa, and I'm assuming because they're the north side and their names, I'm just making assumptions that we're talking about two young African-American young men.
Absolutely. I don't know where to start with that issue, but I want to put this forward. One of the things that I recognized very early, being a prosecutor, is that the defense of somebody accused of crime who has financial resources to hire the best lawyers, who can hire the experts, who can do the forensic analysis, who can have DNA evidence re-examined, get the best defense and better outcomes than somebody from the north side of Tulsa who has no money, no resources, supportive financial or any other way, and gets a hired lawyer for $5,000 to defend a murder one case.
So I absolutely can get absolutely as much justice as I can afford.
I hate to say that, but it's one of the problems with our system. I don't mean to say that the public defenders, federal or state public defenders, aren't hard advocates that work hard for their clients. But the caseload we expect them to handle, particularly in the state system, is unreasonable, right? I mean, how can you have a docket of 50, 60, 100 cases and properly and thoroughly investigate every one of them? And again, I'm not casting stones at anybody.
No,
they are committed to what they do.
I know some amazing,
very good lawyers,
defense attorneys,
yes,
that work tirelessly for
yes,
everybody.
Yes.
But again, you're highlighting situations that maybe limits them.
And I think sometimes, ineffective assistance of counsel is one of the leading causes to wrongful convictions. And I think sometimes lawyers get, defense lawyers, get jaded, desensitized to, oh man, I wasn't there, I did. And you bring sometimes to your defense the stereotypes. I mean, let's be honest, right?
Right.
And assumptions you make about people. And so if you think somebody is innocent, you work really hard to prove that. If you think somebody was possibly involved, you still work hard, but maybe not as hard as you would if you believed in your client's innocence. And I hate to say that, but I think that's just human nature, right?
I don't think.
I'm not justifying it.
I'm not. I'm just saying. I just don't think the attorneys that would have been involved in this case, how do you sleep at night? How do you sleep at night knowing that case is closed, those guys are going to prison, and I'm aware of these facts. I'm aware that there's a maroon vehicle. That same eyewitness that said it was them
had the vehicle.
Had the vehicle. And I'm walking by it. The detective is walking by it as he goes in the house.
Doesn't do any kind of analysis of the car. Nothing.
And I don't bring that up in trial in defense of my client. And I can sleep good at night.
Well, I don't know if they sleep good at night
Well,
or not.
we don't know, right? We don't know. But they didn't run to the Innocence Project the day of conviction.
No. Well, and there wasn't an Innocence Project at that
There was an
point
avenue.
in time.
There had to be an avenue.
Post-conviction relief, but as you know, I mean, it's really hard to get back into court. You know what broke the case open for Malcolm and DeMarco? Michael Wilson, about 8 months after he did this drive-by shooting, committed a bludgeoning death of a Quick Trip store clerk in the middle of the night. Beat him to death with a baseball bat. He gets convicted of that and gets the death penalty. In 2014, I think it was 2014, I think he was going to be executed in January 2014. So in November of 2013, he has his lawyer contact the Innocence Project, and he wants to do a videotaped confession. So 3 days before he was going to be executed, Michael Wilson, in a statement that he makes on camera, says, "I cannot go meet my maker in 3 days' time, knowing that there are 2 men in prison for a crime I committed." Malcolm and DeMarco, without any criminal history, were given life without parole for that drive-by shooting that they didn't commit. And so it was only by the grace of God that Michael Wilson felt the need to come forward, because I think it's possible Malcolm and DeMarco could still be sitting in a state penitentiary for that murder had he not done that videotape confession.
And so that confession alone doesn't do it. So that confession, which is amazing, that confession, coupled with the work that the Innocence Project had been doing for how many years?
7 years.
Gains there another hearing.
Yes, gets us back into court, because you have to come up with new evidence. You can't rehash what happened at trial. You've got to find some new evidence. And at that point in time, we were interviewing the eyewitnesses, and the eyewitnesses were telling us, look, man, I couldn't see who was in that car. I was a 17-year-old kid. I was pressured. I was scared. I was afraid the police were going to start looking at me, you know? And so I just told them it was Malcolm and DeMarco. I don't know to this day how Malcolm and DeMarco's name first came up. But, you know, once they were named, I mean, it was tunnel vision to them.
Right. What's the number one reason? What's the number one reason? Overzealous prosecution by a DA, bad witnesses, poor police work, a combination. What's the number one?
They all contribute to wrongful convictions, but one of the highest, maybe the most critical thing that happens that results in a wrongful conviction is the use of eyewitness identification. And I don't know if you remember, but when I was a young prosecutor, 80s and 90s, we were told eyewitness identification was the best evidence you could have. And what we know now, it's the absolute worst. Someone who's going through the trauma of, a holdup or rape or, some other kind of violent crime, that trauma, they cannot register the identity of the person that's doing it.
We can't even get a case off the ground if somebody tells me they don't see something. We need a witness, right? I can't get it.
But cooperation is an important part of police work, right? If somebody says, I saw Malcolm and DeMarco, well then, I'd want to know where Malcolm and DeMarco were that day. I'd want to interview people that saw them that day, particularly at that time. I mean, it's cooperating. You just don't say, oh, we got eyewitness identification, let's run with it.
Right.
And we know it's the worst. It's the worst evidence.
So you're not saying throw out
eyewitness identification. I'm just saying we need to do more work.
It's got to be more work done with it.
Yes.
It alone is worthless. And we've used it to a fault.
God. I don't know how many people are convicted on eyewitness identification. When I first started doing Innocence work, somebody recommended a book to me called Picking Cotton. And it's the story of a young man, Ronald Cotton, who was convicted of a rape, black man, accused by a white co-ed of a rape. And he was charged and obviously convicted and incarcerated. What's really important about that, and what I think highlights this eyewitness identification issue and trauma's effect on somebody's ability to remember the details of somebody's face, is that the woman who was being raped says that as the rape was proceeding, she said, I told myself two things. One, survive this, do whatever you have to do to survive. And two, look at every detail on his face so that when you get past this, you can go to the police and you can identify this man so we can't ever do it to anybody else. Mm-hmm. But she misidentified him.
Wow.
In a lineup.
Yeah.
And now they're great friends, so it's really a nice story because there's DNA evidence. He requests DNA evidence on the rape kit. They do the DNA, they exonerate Ronald Cotton. Jennifer, I believe is her name, the victim, and Ronald Cotton meet about a year or two after that. They tour the country now, talking about wrongful convictions. And I mean, she says she just cried because he had spent, I think at that point in time, 10 or 12 years in prison for a rape he didn't commit.
How much, and we talked about this just briefly, but how much of these biases and this confirmation bias obviously can push things down the road really, really quick. But how much, and I'm using the term confirmation bias with the assumption that you know what it is, but I'm also am using that term knowing that there's many people that do not know what that is. And so what I'm talking about in this confirmation bias, I'm really talking about elements of implicit bias. I know at the police department we go through some implicit bias training, and it really exposes for us some automatic assumptions that we make without even thinking about it, and to challenge those automatic assumptions as fast as we can. I haven't really heard of prosecutors, DAs, or attorneys as a profession having to go through this type of training.
No, I don't think, I don't know of any. I don't know of any. Now again, I'm not justifying it, but remember the role of a prosecutor is to take the evidence from the investigators and then to look at that evidence to determine if there's probable cause to commit, that person committed a crime and well, first of all, that a crime was committed and that person committed the crime. So they look at things through a different lens, kind of. Would it help, right? Understand how some of these cases come to you, whether or not it was fully investigated?
It
probably
would. I think it would say, let me ask another question of the investigation.
Right.
How
did we identify this person?
Let's look at these things that you would automatically assume, that we might automatically assume, and flip it on its head and look at it from a different point of view before we move forward.
Right.
But they're not doing that.
No, they're not. I mean, there was a point in my life, and I'm just going to admit it. I mean, I remember walking down the street. It was here in Oklahoma City, and there were two young African-American males with hoodies walking down the street, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I changed my purse to the other shoulder. Hmm. And it was only after that I thought, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I started insightfully recognizing, I mean, the first part is recognition that we had those biases.
Awareness.
Right.
Yeah.
And then to maybe do something about it. But yeah, there's no training. I mean, that was just Vicki Behenna going, man, Vic. I mean,
why did you do that?
This is really
what
sad.
made you do
That's
that?
right.
There was nothing.
And that was long before the Innocence
That was
Project.
long before that, right? And it's long before we started identifying that this is
That's right.
there's terminology to this thing.
And I think if white people were honest with themselves, many of them would have identified and admit to similar experiences.
But that takes courage, right? And that
Or
takes some hard
foolishness.
Right? No, it takes courage and it takes some admission. So I really appreciate you opening that door for other people to be able to say, me too. Right, me too, and giving them some time to be able to go. What are we missing here? Right. What is it? How do we help the Innocent Project? How do we get involved? How do we elevate your platform? Because I know we're going to make mistakes, but I don't want those mistakes to be in the numbers that they are right now.
Right.
How do we help?
You know, that's the first thing that I always, when I go talk to groups, I ask them to please recognize our criminal justice system is not perfect and wrongful convictions happen. First, identify that and recognize that as a given. The second part of that is to spread the word that wrongful convictions happen, okay? Because we have juries that sit in this courthouse and in the federal courthouse up the street every month, every week. And I want jurors, ordinary citizens that are sitting on these juries to recognize that if I don't evaluate the evidence fully, somebody might be wrongfully convicted, okay? And to look at it. So start that dialogue. And then the second thing I ask is if your heart is moved to help people who are currently sitting in Oklahoma prisons wrongfully, contact the Oklahoma Innocence Project. We have all sorts of volunteers that come in, and some of them just scan records. Some of them help us find transcripts. Some people copy things. I mean, just whatever you think you can do to help the project, we'd take the help. And we've had over 1,600 requests for assistance since the project opened. We have 2 full-time staff members.
That's my next question. How do I get my family member who I know didn't do it? I know they didn't do it.
Right to the Innocence Project.
Yeah, but
Right?
there's 1,600 people.
Well,
Vicki, come on.
I know.
I need you to look at how do I get it done?
You know, well, first of all, like I said, you have to write to the project, and then whatever evidence you can gather yourself. You know, family members, some of them are very tenacious, and some of them are out there, you know, talking to people, even well after the person has been convicted and incarcerated. And so if you have that evidence, bring that to us. That helps us evaluate it. We do triage cases. DNA cases where we think there might be DNA evidence goes to the top, right? I mean, if there's DNA evidence that can be analyzed and we can get somebody out quicker, then we want to know that. So, you know, any evidence that you can gather, any help that you can give us to help us better triage that case and put it in queue, that helps us do it and get to those cases quicker. But you're right. I mean, I don't want to say that it's not going to be a long queue.
How many are you all working right now?
You know, thank God we have students, law students, that are absolutely committed to freeing the wrongfully convicted. And so they are opening cases every semester. Some of our students, we have up to 5 in the entry level, and then we have an advanced clinic. working 2 cases for each student. So we're working many cases,
Okay.
many cases annually. And they roll over. You know what I mean? If for some reason the students can't finish the work, then
to the
it
next.
rolls over to the next semester and those students pick it up. So we're moving those cases as fast as we can. But understand that even in the most perfect of situations, it takes 5 to 7 years.
Just in one day is
Sad.
too many.
Sad.
If you didn't do it.
Yeah. You know, Malcolm and DeMarco tell this horrible story of, there's a blue book in Oklahoma that has the names, it's about this thick, and it has the names of all the lawyers that are admitted to the bar in Oklahoma, broken down by county and city and blah, blah, blah. And Malcolm and DeMarco, because they were tried together and convicted together, couldn't be in the same facility, right? They were always at different facilities. So independent of one another, those 2 men, for 22 years, wrote letters to every lawyer in that blue book asking for their help because they were innocent.
Yeah.
It was only when the Oklahoma Innocence Project got the resources, the money and the time and the knowledge that those men were able to walk free. It's sad.
So thanks for what you do.
It's an honor.
It is an honor to talk to you. I'd like to see more of you. I'd like to see more of you doing some stuff around here. But
I think I know what you're laying down.
I really would like to see more of you in your heart, in your heart for justice. And so all of us need to have more of a heart for justice. We're going to continue this conversation. So if you start tuning in and helping me navigate the right questions to ask for people. So because ultimately we just want everybody to get a fair shot. We don't want the kind of justice system where some people have a better advantage of getting a fair deal than other people. Just want justice.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's the point.
Don't want people to get away with anything, and then we can talk about the penal system and reform and what should happen in prison. There's so many conversations that can happen that you can help me with, right?
Yeah.
So it's good. So that's it for Conversations with Cubit. Look up the Innocence Project and do whatever you can to help. We cannot have these numbers. We can do better. So thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.